talking about how you guys are legends in my mind. I put in my group chat, my sports group chat that I was doing this. Everybody went crazy. So it's a real joy. I was even rewatching the movie a little bit before I came in, and it just took me back to that time. And then so much about wanting to be a filmmaker, like from Chicago, like that was the movie. It was like the John Hughes movies, but that one was kind of our movie because, just seeing y'all and seeing how y'all came along was so inspirational growing up. So I'm very happy to be here.
Hey, Daniel, I always tell him, I say, man, it's only 2 movies in Chicago that represent Chicago as Coolie High and Hoop Dreams.
Yeah. I love them both.
And let me add a side note to that. Where were they both made at?
Northside.
Northside?
Y'all got that one. That's all y'all got.
That's all we got. Says the Southside trader. But we're gonna get into that later. How his Southside-ness got a little Northside love.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Hoop Dreams, the podcast, an Unlearning Network production.
Special show today, man. This one here, Doc, this takes us back home. We going back to Chicago, but not just Chicago. We're going to Southside. Because on the show today,
man,
we got a Southside native. He's a writer, director, producer. He directed some episodes of such amazing shows as Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, Grey's Anatomy, my wife's #1 show. I know you think it's Grey's Anatomy, but it's not. It's his next show, The Blacklist, that he's done. And that list goes on and on and on. We'd like to welcome to the show one of Chicago's very own, Mr. Daniel Willis. I'm Will Gates, and that's my dog.
Arthur Agee. Daniel, welcome, man. Chi-Town in the house all around this baby, man.
Clearly, you've seen the movie Hoop Dreams. You said you rewatched it. Give us your thoughts, though, when you first saw the movie.
It was just interesting because I saw it years later. I didn't see it in real time because I was young. So I kind of came at it like knowing that it was a classic film. It was a legendary film. So it's like I'm looking back into the past, but I'm seeing things that are familiar to me when I was, a little bit younger than age. So I'm born in 1986. And so I think the movie picks up, 1989, but it goes through like the early 90s. So I'm like seeing like all the things I saw as a really young kid, like even like the buses and like the police cars and like, all of that stuff is like, okay, this is kind of filling in my own personal history in Chicago, even though I was young. But just seeing the story of like these, I had cousins who grew up in Cabrini, and just like, seeing them, you guys come from the areas that you came from that look like the areas that I came from. I'm from like South Shore. We grew up in Roseland, Inglewood, all over. It was like, oh, this is really dope that someone thinks this is special enough to like tell the story and like tell it in depth and like kind of see you guys move in those spaces and the challenges you went through and the things that were familiar, like the family stuff and all of those things. It just felt personal. It felt like we knew who you were. So that's what kind of grabbed me. I probably watched it in high school, maybe, college the first time. So it had a sense of nostalgia for me, and just kind of seeing you guys do what you did, made it feel really special to be from where we're from.
Hey, Daniel, let me tell you something. I was so much of a TV kid back then. I watched all the, the Happy Days, the Threes Companies, all them shows, Different Strokes. So I was into, just television and wanting to see how it worked. But I never knew what a documentary was, even while we was filming. Really? I'm 14, 15 years old. Me and Will didn't know what a documentary was compared to just a film or a TV. You know what I'm saying? We didn't know none of that.
So I'm curious, what was the experience of like having the cameras come into your home and just kind of seeing all these intimate moments and following you to school and being around town? What was that like for y'all?
I can answer this one, Agee.
Yeah.
Well, we can do this, Daniel. You can film Hoop Dreams too. And you can get
but people want to know what y'all up to, man. So that's what's up. Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, it was so crazy. Me and Will just, pretty much thought that, that they came around just because, we was playing basketball and stuff. But once they wanted to meet our parents and, they was really serious about wanting to put the film together, because it wasn't even supposed to be a film about me and William. They were actually doing a 30-minute piece on PBS about inner city basketball, and they were going to go to different courts around the city of Chicago and just focus on basketball, how it's played on the basketball courts. But they met me at Delano, and they didn't. And so, let me tell you, it's so crazy. They didn't even know me and William knew each other at that time. So William is this 14-year-old prodigy that's being recruited by St. Joe's, and just so happened the day of the St. Joe's camp, Isaiah Thomas was there, and they invited William.
I remember,
William didn't even know nothing about that I was coming there with cameras and none of that.
None of that. As a matter of fact, before Agee, I had already been in the camp. I was already going to St. Joe's. So I wasn't at St. Joe's. I was just at basketball camp. I was already going to the school. So Pete has a camp. He was having a camp every summer. So when Agee and the camera showed up, I'm looking like, man, that's the dude that dude from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but here's what's crazy. So they tell Agee that part of the story. They tell me they're doing a documentary. If it's going to be a PBS documentary, I got the same thing, but it says, but we want to show how kids go from street ball to organized basketball. Like, that's what they told me. So they gave Agee one story, and they gave me another story. Yeah.
That's something
really
else.
crazy.
But that's kind of like the beauty of like documentary filmmaking just in general. It's just like you can't plan every part of it. And like sometimes, things just kind of come together in ways that you wouldn't expect. And you really got to kind of follow the story that's happening rather than just kind of being locked into whatever original idea you might have. So that's really, really dope.
Absolutely, especially when you ain't got no money. That's a whole nother thing. But as much as we appreciate, man, that Hoop Dreams love, Daniel, this story is, we call it the Hoop Dreams podcast, but truthfully, this is the Daniel Willis podcast because this is about you. Yep. Agee and I, man, we want to know your origin story. Take us back to your neighborhood growing up because, you grew up in the, late 80s. The 90s was really kind of like your time. The beginning of the Nickelodeon phases of the world. Take us what it was like growing up, man, on the south side of Chicago.
It was great, man. I grew up in a working class household, mostly right there on like 81st and Euclid. So right off like 79th and Jeffrey, South Shore. Went to Kenwood Academy for high school. It was just like I feel like it's just kind of a normal, like, kind of Black upbringing on the south side of Chicago. My parents were there, so that was great. Went to, church, and I didn't do many sports growing up. I tried to do sports. I tried to play baseball, wasn't very good. I tell the story, I was like, I was a bench player. And it was my freshman year at Kenwood. And, we played like 4 or 5 innings or something like that. And it was time for me to come in. But it was freezing cold, as you know, like the beginning of baseball season in Chicago is really cold. And they kind of called down. They said, "Hey, Willis, come on in." And I was like, "You know what, coach? I think I'm good. I'm fine." Whatever. So at that moment, I realized maybe I didn't have the killer instinct that it would take. But I love sports. So I used to read Jay Mariotti's column in the Sun-Times every day and read the kind of sports writers for the Tribune as well. And so I wanted to be a sports writer. So that was kind of my focus when it came to sports. It's like just enjoying it, but wanting to cover it, maybe wanting to be a play-by-play guy, all those things. Chicago, great sports city, especially that time. I expected my team to win a championship every single year, especially when it came to basketball. So that was just that was kind of my just the kind of atmosphere that I came up in terms of sports.
So you was talking about, man, just that growing up and, on the south side of Chicago with your family, how, you really grew up in a great family. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really lucky. My dad, he owned his own business. He rehabbed houses all over the city. So we moved around a lot. And so I was able to kind of watch him like do that thing and just kind of, tag along in the summertime and, pretend like I was working, putting up siding and putting up drywall and doing all those things. So that was fun to get a chance to spend some time with him. My mom was a teacher. She even taught at the school, the elementary school. Our Lady of Peace is where I started, right there on 79th and Jeffrey. And she was a teacher there up until I got to her grade. Then she said, no, I don't want to teach my own son. So she went off to do other things. But it was just kind of I don't know, it felt really regular. I look back and say, hey, this is a working class kind of upbringing, but I didn't know that at the time, They were just kind of working hard, doing the best that they could for us. We were a church family, so I spent a lot of time at church growing up. And then when I got to high school, it was really about trying to figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. We talked a little bit about sports. I love sports. I read the paper every day. That got me into journalism. So next thing you know, I was writing sports columns when I was at Kenwood, covering our teams, which were struggling at the time. I don't know if you guys remember, it was rough in the 90s for Kenwood, but we're doing pretty good these days. So I was doing that thing and just, trying to kind of become a person and figure out who I wanted to be. And then, next thing I knew it was time to go to college. One good thing, and we'll talk a little bit about the north side, south side of it, is I got a job at Wrigley Field my senior year at Kenwood. And so I had set up my schedule. So I got out of school like 1 o'clock. So I would leave a little early, get over to the north side to be an usher at Wrigley Field. And that really cemented the Cubs fan in me. I couldn't shake it after that. Going there every day. Yeah, it was. Hey,
special. Daniel, let me ask you this. Man, growing up, usually, you say you was trying to find out what you wanted to do. And, normally kids at my age, they wasn't thinking about wanting to be a writer. Was it anybody else that was around you that had the same type of drive or dream, wanted to be a journalist or a writer? Because, if we playing basketball, you got friends, me and William, we got about six or seven dudes think we going to the NBA and want to go to college. But that's kind of off kilter of a kid wanting to be a journalist. What was it anybody else that you was able to, that you can, confide in like that had the same drive of being a journalist?
Not that specifically, but I was pretty lucky in that I we would play open gym in basketball, or in gym class we would play basketball, and I learned very quickly that I was not amongst the premier players in my class. They called me a set shooter, basically. So that meant just kind of go in the corner and wait for an open shot. Right. And I was pretty good. I probably hit it maybe 40% of the time, which is pretty good for it. But no one guarded me because they knew I wasn't going to put the ball on the ground. So what I realized was, if I'm not going to be one of these guys, like how do I, stay a part of it? And I always like to write. So I was like, okay, so it's like, maybe, I like reading these columns in the Sun-Times. I like reading these columns in the Tribune. It's like, maybe I can be one of these guys. And it's something that just kind of came natural to me. So it was like, I love talking about sports. At that time, ESPN was huge. Pardon the Interruption was coming along. I was like, oh, well, maybe I can, it's like, these guys are writers. Michael Wilbon, he did it. He's from St. Ignatius. It's like, okay, maybe I can be like Michael Wilbon, so it's like, I had those kind of like touch points, in media. It's like Brian Gumbel. It's like, okay, it's a black guy. It's like, they're from Chicago. It's like, maybe I can be like those guys. So there was no one in my life who did that kind of thing, but I could kind of turn on the television and see those examples. And so that kind of is what put me down that path.
Man, that's special there, because, just following up what Agee was saying, because we had somebody that kept pushing us. So my question is, when we wasn't feeling encouraged, we were down, Agee had his dad, he had friends, I had my brother, I had friends. They was like, hey man, you can make it, you can make this happen, man. You almost there. Was there a person in your life that began to see that dream in you, that said, hey Dan, man, you got something special, man?
I think it was one of my English teachers who was the journalism teacher, also at Kenwood, and he also was the men's basketball coach, Mr. Green. And so I saw him. He's a white guy working at this like 90% black school. So it's like, for him to be able to kind of like move in that space, like made him cool because he wasn't whack, but he also wasn't like, you know what I mean. He was a white guy who knew how to be around black people, and so I admire him just because of how he treated all of us. And he's the one who introduced me to journalism. Like I was in an English class. He was like, hey, come and take this journalism class. I see you talking to the guys about sports all the time. He's the one who said, hey, this is a good college to go to if you want to be in journalism. So he kind of, helped me on that path. Besides him, I just had a really good community. You know what I mean? It's like my parents were encouraging. They weren't like the kind of parents who like knew everything that I was doing. So they weren't like on top of me all the time, but they made me feel like if I wanted to do something, I could do it, and then just kind of around me, be it, church or family or whatever, I was always just encouraged and complimented and told that, I was, able to do what I wanted to do. So it was no one explicitly saying, hey, you could be the next Michael Wilbon or whatever it was. It was just like this general kind of like support. Which looking back, I realized everybody doesn't have that. So it's like, that's something that I now recognize as privilege because I was like, dang, it was like all these adults telling me I could do whatever I wanted. And everybody doesn't get that.
Yeah.
That's real talk there. True too, man. So couple of things, man. You got brothers, sisters?
Nah, just me.
Really?
Yeah,
no wonder you got all the love, Agee. You got all the love. It was just him.
he ain't have to share no oodles and noodles or nothing.
I was the only child. My father had 9 sisters and 3 brothers, though. So I had a ton of cousins on that side. And then my mom had siblings. So I was the oldest cousin on that side. So I got 2 different experiences. On my mom's side, I was the oldest cousin. So I was kind of, there was a certain expectation to kind of, be an example for your younger cousins. On the other side, I was the youngest pretty much. So they used to beat me up all the time. And that's how I got a little bit tougher because I was around them. My closest cousins were 10 years older than me. So they were just bullying me and just kind of pushing me around. But every once in a while, letting me hang out and listen to the music that they listen to and do all those things. So it was really the best of both worlds to kind of get that experience of being around people your own age, but also, being an only child as well.
I want to ask you this, particularly when it comes to passion and interest. Like a lot of people think Agee and I that all we did was grow up and we played basketball, that we have no other interests. We played no other sports. What we did, we played baseball, we played football. Now, it was we were playing football on rocks and concrete, but, we played other sports. Did you have other passions and interests growing up besides just, writing or wanting to do movies? Were there other interests there?
I didn't even want to do movies until I got to college. Like that wasn't even in my kind of world. So for me, it was mostly sports. Like as a watcher, I knew I wasn't going to be a really good athlete. I didn't have those kind of aspirations. I was a church kid too. So it's like my mom kept me in church. I was there at least 2 days a week, sometimes 3 days a week. So I was just doing that thing. Like I was the kid who was like the head of the junior usher board, they were trying to train me to be a deacon as a kid. So I was like, and then that's kind of, I like had my church friends and I had my school friends. So I acted one way with my church friends. I acted one way with my school friends. So I was kind of learning just kind of how to move in the world. Like can't cuss here, but cuss all you want over here. Like all that stuff. So it was really just about, just kind of, like moving between those 2 worlds. But really it was a lot about sports. I can't think of, because I wasn't into comic books. I really wasn't into movies. I did love television. I didn't think about it as a career. One thing that was interesting, like me and my friends were weird. Like we loved Martin growing up, but we also loved Seinfeld, right? So it was like, it's like I love the Jamie Foxx show, but I also love Frasier. So it's like I'm looking back, and it was like, okay, I don't know what that was about, but it was like there was a diversity of interests. It's like I didn't necessarily have to see a Black person like on a show to like find something in that show that I liked. And that wasn't intellectual, that was just instinctual. It's just like, oh, I think Friends is funny. I don't know why. I've never met any people like this. But like there's something in it. So I'm thankful for that now that I had a more broad kind of interest in terms of what I found entertaining back then.
Hey, Daniel, let me ask you this. I know the people would love to hear this because, I mean, we still, fighting that battle. But who was the first Black writer you met that wrote for a show?
Shoot. That actually wrote for a show. It was this woman, and this wasn't until I was in film school almost, I think.
Damn.
There was it was a long time, and it's like you're outside of LA. But I used to listen to these podcasts. I listened to podcasts, and they would interview writers, and mostly it would be writers who, I mean, I admired their resumes, but there was no real resonance. And then there was this one particular writer. Her name was Tamiko Brooks. She had gone to Columbia College, so that caught my interest. She was a Black woman, and she had worked on shows like Moesha and the Parkers and stuff like that, which was dope at the time. So I was like, this is a person who I feel some kind of connection to. And so this was like the beginning of like Twitter as well. So like I sent her a message on Twitter and I said, hey, I heard you on this podcast. You're from Chicago. I'm moving out to LA. Would love to have coffee with you. And she said yes. And so when I got out here, like she sat down with me and kind of gave me some game and like, do this, don't do that, kind of this is how to move a little bit. And a relationship formed. And years later, she would be the person who would send my resume over to Grey's Anatomy. And that would be my first job in television. But to your point, I never met any like Black entertainment professionals until I got to Los Angeles. I knew of them. It's like, I know who Spike Lee is. I know who John Singleton is, but like, these are like, Mount Rushmore people. It's like, it doesn't feel like you can touch that. I wish I would have met my equivalent of, Isaiah Thomas when I was in high school. I feel like maybe that would have, that would have sent me in that direction a little bit sooner, but it was later for me.
Explain to me, what is it like, and you just brought this up yourself, like Agee looked at, Isaiah was the guy for him. What, who's that person for you though? Even when you got in college, like who was that person that you like, man?
I feel like it starts with Spike for real, because like he was like the icon, right? Like, and then he did this great thing where it's like he made these movies, but he also like write these companion books, right? And so I could watch School Days and then I could go to the library and get the book and like see how he made it. Like he would have a script in there, he would have his notes, he would tell you like all the ups and downs. So it's like, oh, this is how you make a movie. Like it was like a blueprint. It's crazy. I'm thinking about this for the first time as I'm saying it. So it's like, that was like pivotal. And it was like, he's a success. He's like looked at in our community as like, someone who really, did well. So it's him, but it was a lot of people, It's weird. It's like my interests were all over the place. It's like I was watching Woody Allen movies. I was watching movies that were like foreign films. It's like all these things, I could find something in it that was interesting to me, or I could see a version of my personality in these people. And that was cool for me because it was like, I know where I'm from. I know what my experience is, but like I can see things outside of that experience that I can still like have a connection to. So it was like, okay, I don't have to tell stories only about how I grew up. Like I can tell stories about, science fiction or, whatever it is, if I can find myself in it. So that was practice in doing that. But if there's one person, it's got to be Spike.
Hey, man, it's so funny you brought up Spike, man. It was, I don't know why my brain thought of him this way, because when I first saw Spike, it's like, I thought he was a damn teenager. Because I thought he was a short teenager, not realizing he was a grown ass man, 23, 30 some, doing commercials with Michael Jordan and shit. But because of his height, I thought he was a teenager, and then he just looked at, like a kid. I'm like, damn, how is this kid from New York coming out here doing all these films, and like how did he do that shit? And he like you said, it was so funny, man. He flew me and William out to New York to come speak at his basketball camp, and gave us our first pair of black 11 patent leather Jordans.
Oh, that's what's up. That's what's up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you this, Dan, because I'm gonna get a little serious with you now, too, man. Since we're in here, when I hear your story, man, and I was looking you up on the internet and all these other things, and you just said this a few minutes ago when you were talking about how you didn't have to you found yourself in a lot of different types of stories. It wasn't just, because I grew up on the Southside of Chicago, I got to tell this kind of story, or, I lived here, that's why I got into movies. Have you ever felt any backlash from that people would say, hey man, particularly from our community, Dan isn't representing us by, he ain't telling, he ain't writing about the shy. He's writing about a different kind of shy. Have you ever felt any of that? Or pressure to write that?
I feel like not pressure to write that or do those things, but like I remember if you expressed interest in things that were not typical as a young person, then you could get clowned for that. So it's like I didn't roll around telling everybody that Seinfeld was my favorite show, because I knew that was something that will not engender a lot of praise from your peers when you're 16. You know what I mean? So like part of me just kind of kept that part of myself and my interest just, to myself or to those friends who kind of shared those things. I mean, I was really lucky. It's like, I grew up with kids from all over the South Side of Chicago, but there was such diversity in us because of our experiences. So it's like some people like the typical things, but a lot of people, didn't. And their minds were a little bit more. And then also, I was like, I did this program in Kenwood where we started high school in 7th grade. So it was like one of those kind of accelerated programs. They had it at Whitney Young and Morgan Park and Kenwood.
Yeah, my niece went to that too, though.
Yeah. And so, I mean, these were kids really like, some of the kind of really bright kids from all over the city kind of put into this program. And that was interesting, too, because we're like at Kenwood, which at the time was kind of a rough school. But we were in kind of, put in this kind of smaller group of kids who were smart. And so we were like, able to kind of have the best of both worlds, where it's like you have this kind of bubble that you can live in terms of academics, but also you experience the culture more broadly with all of your classmates who weren't a part of that smaller group too. So with that came, people who were interested in different kind of books and different kind of movies and different kind of television shows and things like that. So that exposure gave me confidence as a kid that I didn't have to like everything that everybody else liked. And it was okay to have interests that were not, the interest of, all of my family members or friends who didn't go to the kind of school that I went to, which helped me going forward. Like having that confidence as a kid made me feel like I could go and beyond where I was from and not have an expectation to be a certain way.
I'm glad you said that, man, because there's so many kids out there that because I guess they call it keeping it real, or, I ain't gonna never forget where I came from, but you're always trying to express to them, you having different interests, you having different life, you walking in a different aspect of life doesn't mean you forgot. It just means you wired differently. You see things differently, and to deny yourself of that really puts you at a disadvantage in life, man. And I just want to say congratulations to you, man, because Doc, I'm on your page. I like Seinfeld. When I was coming up, it was cheers for me. A lot of people, I used to tell people, if you can get past the theme music, it's a hilarious show.
That's it. And that's the beauty. I think that's the beauty of TV and movies. It's like, I watched Cheers. I didn't watch that until I was out in LA. And it was like, I don't know any of these people, but I can see personality like things in Norm that I've seen in my uncles. I can see, something about Ted Dance's character. It's like, he's the cool guy who gets all the girls. Who doesn't want to, who doesn't
right.
What? That's aspirational for everybody, no matter what he looks like. Right. So,
Hey, my top 3 white shows was MASH,
okay,
Cheers, Three's Company, I have 4, and Seinfeld. I love Seinfeld. Yeah. That was the most creative, stupidest show ever, and it was about nothing.
Exactly. Now I'll tell you, when the MASH theme song came on, that meant it was time to go to bed. Like when I heard that,
I was gonna say I hated that show, man. It's a funny show. It's a funny show, but I'm with Dan. When it came on, man, it's time to go to school tomorrow.
Yeah,
man. I
got to get up and start.
Man, this is crazy. Well, Dan, we want to move into your high school, man. You went to Kenwood High School. Mm-hmm. A lot of famous folks come up out of Kenwood.
Oh yeah.
It's known for, it's a school of stars. But tell us about how was high school for you, man?
It was great, but it was weird. I was there for 6 years. So it's strange. It's like you have the experience of coming in as a freshman and you're new or whatever, but that wasn't my experience. I had already been there for 2 years and I had already had my people. So how it worked is like you come in 7th grade and there you're kind of in a protected environment. It's like we had a part of the school. We did have high school classes with high school students, but it's like, they kind of cloister you a little bit because you're so young. But by the time freshman year came along, maybe out of our class of, 100 kids, maybe like 25 kids stayed. So I had already known these people. We already knew where everything was. We already knew who all the teachers were and so it was like, it was a different experience. I didn't have like all the kind of roadblocks or just typical high school experiences. So that was good, right. But it was different, like going from this kind of small group and then like being put into like this bigger pond, right? So it was like, students from all over. Now it kind of became, the typical thing where it's like the athletes and like the cool kids and the kids who dress real well and like the kids who were nerdy and then like the kids who were going to run for student government and all that other stuff. So for me, it was about like finding my space, and what I realized is all my friends were the smart kids, but I wasn't quite as smart as them. So it's like I was above average student, but I wasn't like, I wasn't going to Harvard, you know what I mean? So I was trying to figure out and just like where do I fit in? How can I develop a personality that worked? I wasn't like trying to work super hard, but I wanted to do well. Mm-hmm. So it was like, I was like, I looked up to like Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. So I was the kid who was always coming up with like schemes, and like trying to get out of class. And, I made these little press passes up when I wanted to be a journalist, and I would show them to security as I was coming through. It's like, I don't have to be in class. I got my press pass. I'm working on the story. So I was like always doing that kind of thing. That's when I got into journalism. And, that's where I kind of figured out that I wanted to write about sports.
Love it, man.
Wow.
Love it, love it, love it. What year was that? Your freshman year?
My freshman year was 2000. Man, yeah, 2000. I started at Kenwood in like 98, and then my freshman year was 2000. Then I came out in 2004. So it was a lot. It was bad years for the Bulls back then.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Shoot, bad years for all the teams because the Cubs were up and down. They had that good year in 98, and I think 2001 they went to the playoffs. And then it was kind of not a great sports era in Chicago, but I still love them.
Yeah, we went through a dip.
So film school dealing with cameras. Do you remember your first camera?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with photography because I feel like that's where it started. And that goes back to Kenwood too. I took a photography class my freshman year. One of my family friends gave me a camera that I still have. It's up here somewhere. And that was kind of my introduction to the arts. Now, it didn't take, But I feel like I'm a person who believes everything counts. You know, if you look back over your life, I feel like all these pieces are coming together. So that was just an introduction. I was not an artsy kid. I did not like participate in theater. I wasn't like in a movie club, none of that stuff. But I was just being introduced to things along the way that I feel like would pay off years later. I really got into like making like movies like my kind of freshman year of college. I went to but because of journalism, I went to the University of Missouri, which has, to me, the best school of journalism in the country. And so I went there, I got down there, I had my notepad, you know, I had my voice recorder. I was ready to be like the next great sports writer. And I got down there and realized I didn't like asking people questions. I was too nervous. I was like, this is for me. It was just, I was awkward. I was like, I don't like this. And so, you know, I changed my major. I took a theater class, and then that opened the door. I learned about people like August Wilson. I learned about, you know, all those kind of Shakespeare classes that I took in high school started to have more relevance to me. So I started looking back at the things I had been exposed to. And then part of that was just like picking up a video camera. I forget, maybe I borrowed it or something like that. And I would make like little short movies, like Charlie Chaplin movies, basically, like silent films. I would be at work. I worked at the radio station. So I just set up the camera. And when I wasn't talking on the radio, I started to kind of make these little shorts. I cannot remember what caused me to do that, but it's just something I just started doing. And it just kind of started there.
Now, what was your major in college?
So I started off journalism, and then I went to English, which isn't a real major. So I was like, I just
all the English majors out there.
Yeah, right. No, it's great. It's great because, you know, I learned literature and I learned to think critically, which I feel like is the point of college anyway. So it's like it forced me to kind of wrestle with things and try to figure things out and try to think deeply about things, which is really important. But it didn't like create like a direct path for a career. So I feel like, you know, in my kind of English literature education, that exposed me to theater, that exposed me to film classes, and I started to put the pieces together. It's like, I always like to write. I'm kind of into theater now. I like to perform. I like to write like short plays. And then that turned in, well, I got this 10-minute play. Why don't I turn it into a short film? So it's like one thing kind of built upon the next thing.
It's funny, you have such an interesting story because every time you I think you're going this way and you be like, yeah, but I really wasn't interested in that. I'm like, okay, how you get on that road then? You know, it's like I love your story so much, man, because it lets, particularly, you know, I'm hoping our listeners will hear and know you ain't got to know what you want to do like right away. In terms of, you got to have this full plan and just walk this course and can't get to where you need to be. You allowed yourself to experience, you know, man, really what all of like college could be about and what high school could be about. So my question for you right now is, man, like I took this class at Marquette. I did it because I thought it was going to be like, you know, you're always looking for a class that you could just get an easy A out of. So, you know, so I took the history of jazz. But it turned out to be like, it turned out to be like one of the best class I ever took because it was like, man, jazz started like everything. So I was like, this is, and that really actually opened my mind up to like, oh, wow, I can do a lot of things. You know, we are so creative. We could. So what was that class for you?
It was 2 classes. I'll start with jazz. It was called Jazz, Pop, and Rock. And basically what it was like the history of music, history of American music, starting with jazz, up to pop music through rock music. And I remember being in that class, we had like this professor, he was like very flamboyant guy. He was like, you know, walking around the stage and, you know, had this really crazy voice and was always disheveled. I'll never forget that. And this was new to me. So I was like, okay, you know, my roommate who was older told me to take the class. I liked the girl who's sitting next to me. So, you know, I had a lot of stuff going on. And I remember this moment. He was like, okay, I'm going to play you a song. And he plays this song. It's called Potato Head Blues. And it's like that kind of old kind of New Orleans jazz. You've heard it before. If you've been to New Orleans, you like the kind of the kind of sidewalk bands. It's typical. And then all of a sudden, everything changed, right? We get this solo, this trumpet solo that is like nothing I've ever heard before. And what it turns out, no one had ever heard it before at the time. It's Louis Armstrong, like basically changing what jazz music was, and I could hear it. Right, like I wasn't a music guy. I got kicked out of the choir in high school because I couldn't catch a note. So I was not a musical person. I had no inclination towards it, but I could hear the difference. I could hear what jazz music was before Louis Armstrong and like after he made the solo. And so for me, that opened up my mind. It was like, oh, this is amazing. So I started to like think about jazz. Like I was the kid. It's like everybody was listening. I mean, I listened to Lil Wayne as well. He was the biggest rapper at the time, but I was listening to Dave Brubeck and I was listening to Louis Armstrong. That helped me with the girls too, because that's what would be playing in my car. And it was like, well, I never heard this before. So it was like that kind of built upon everything that came before of like trying to be a little bit different, trying to just kind of like things that were interesting to me and kind of really going deep into it. I think it's a foundational thing. I think it really starts with my family and my community about like confidence and feeling like I could do things and try things. So I didn't have to have a plan that had to work out exactly right. Like if something, like if I ran into a curve, I felt like I could handle the curve. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how it was. And then also I took a theater class. My roommate said, hey, take this class. He was a junior. I was a freshman. So he was like, hey, take this acting for non-majors class. So I took it, never acted before in my life, never thought about acting before. And I was like, oh, this is fun. Like, we were, reading plays that I had never heard of. And there were more talented people in the class. They were theater nerds. They grew up like in high school doing theater. They wanted to be actors. This was foreign to me. I came into this never having thought of it, but I admired how good they were. And I was like, yo, this guy's really talented. Like, he really gets it. And so that encouraged me to want to be good at that thing too. So that sent me to the library to start reading more plays and, trying. And then it's like, I knew a whole bunch of white playwrights before I knew who August Wilson was. I was like, oh, who's this guy, August Wilson? Now I'm reading his plays like, oh, these characters sound like my aunts and my uncles and my dad and my grandfather and all this thing. So it's like, just trying things, like being exposed to things. And that's what, that's why I wish like more kids just got exposed to stuff, because I feel like that's how you figure out what you want to do. But if you never are shown that, or you don't get that privilege or opportunity to see it, it's like you might be the next great director, but you didn't know that was possible for you.
Hey, Daniel, you hit it right on the head, man. There's a thing that Charles Barkley always says, talking about, why do all our kids always have to be either an entertainer or a sports person? You know what I'm saying? Or I'm like, well, that's what's shown to us in our as we are growing up. We're not seeing black bankers. We're not seeing jazz artists. We're taught about jazz artists only around Black History time. But like you said, we're not exposed to those things. Like, I did not know that you can write a screenplay and just sell it to a movie studio. And let them, you just, all I did was write the screenplay and just sold it. I got me a quick $250,000. Didn't know you can do that.
Yeah.
So when you said that, like, we need to expose these kids to certain other industries that we don't see on a daily basis.
And in Chicago in particular, it's like one of the things I love, like when I worked on the Chicago shows, they had like internships and they had programs to kind of bring kids into entertainment, but not necessarily as a writer or director. Like if you go into a film set, you guys have been on film, it's like there's hundreds of people and you got grips, you got electricians, You got people in every department, hair, makeup, all these things. There are opportunities for that. You don't need to go to college for it. You know, you can get kind of the training that you need. And these are like middle class jobs where people can make like good living. So like, I like that now that so much shooting is happening in Chicago, that it's like I walked into the Chicago fire set and my like second cousin was an intern in the grip department.
Wow.
And I was like, yo,
I know you were surprised to see him.
Yeah, and I was so happy. It was like, okay, so this is something. It's like you get a union job, you're good. You know, you're good.
And
so
Daniel,
like,
I didn't know the people who you just said, the makeup artists and people. Some of those people are freelancers. They're just being hired by the Yeah.
I love working in Chicago too, because you see like our kind of people, you know. So it's like they have these kind of big positions on these jobs, but they just, you know, they regular folks from the Southside or the West Side. So that makes me excited every time I get home to work on Chicago shows.
That's beautiful.
Dan, I'm laughing, man, because I want to say, boy, did we take the exact same classes in college? Because I took the theater class too, man. I was sitting in there, man, trying to read plays, study plays. You're getting up on the stage and you're like, oh, man, we really got to do this? So I remember all that, man. That was crazy.
I think there's something too, is like we went to similar schools. I went to Mizzou, you went to Marquette, and it's like coming from where we come from and going into those spaces was, I mean, for me, really different. Now, you're an athlete, so I feel like maybe your experience was a little bit different than mine, but I was just a regular guy. But it's like, you know, coming into those spaces too, it's like you have to have a certain amount of support, but you also have to have a certain amount of kind of confidence to be able to kind of adjust to life, because life is really different. I didn't realize how Black Chicago was until I went to Missouri. Like I thought, like Chicago, I was like, I didn't realize I was from one of the blackest cities in America until I went there, and life was totally different, you know.
But y'all got a beautiful campus, by the way, man. Beautiful campus.
It's special.
There, man.
It's special.
Yeah,
it's special.
Yeah. Now y'all got my boy down there. Y'all got my cousin down there coaching the b-ball team, Coach Dennis Gates.
Is that true?
Yes.
My friend Alan, also from Chicago, I think they went to school together. So now he's a Mizzou fan too. So we builded Mizzou fans because of that brother, and he's doing well with them. They lost last night. It was a tough one, but they're doing really well. I'm proud of those guys. Mm-hmm.
Well, they smacked the mess out of my son's school. I think they ended up beating them by 40. It's like, oh my goodness.
What school is that?
I digress on that though. Well, he goes to HCU. He's at a mid-major, so you know they was
okay.
40.
We had tell them we had a WNBA star that went there on our show.
Oh yes. Sophie Cunningham.
Oh, dope. Okay.
Yeah, man. And
the women's team is doing well this year too. So I've been following them pretty closely. But that's awesome.
Agee, who went there too? The lefty, played with the Lakers.
Anthony Peeler.
Not Peeler. Not Peeler.
No.
Not Peeler.
He went to Mizzou. He's the left. His whole he became a singer.
He became a singer.
He's
one of our first
I don't
earlier
know.
guests. Yeah. Why can't I think of his name? You know, when we get done, his name is going to be
you're going to think about it, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to pop up with me. But it'll come to me. But listen, Dan, we want to do something with you, man. This is called Halftime. Agee and I are going to throw some quick hitters at you. And we just want to get your response. But I'm gonna hit you. I think this is I'm going to give you a softball toss right here. So,
all right.
Or it may not be one, but give me your top 5 films of all time.
Now that's tough, man. That's tough. I'm looking around because I got some posters up here.
Right.
I mean, for me, it starts with Do the Right Thing. I really love that film. I don't know. It felt really special. Like it felt like it's a very aggressive film. It's very in your face. It kind of makes you aware that you're watching a movie rather than like one of those movies you can kind of just throw on and put on the background. And because of who made it, it was like, okay, this is the film of his that everyone celebrates. So it must be something special. So it kind of sent me to watching it over and over. So that's one. I put Malcolm X on that list as well from Spike, which I really love. I love a film called Annie Hall. It's a Woody Allen film. That's a film. It's one of those kind of in that Seinfeld vein where it's like, I don't know these people. I don't understand them, but this guy's funny. Like, it's like, I don't know why I like this thing, but it felt special. There's this great film called The Brothers McMullen. This is Edward Burns' film. And there was a time where I was just kind of looking at these movies that were like cheaply made, that felt like it's like you can look at the movie and say, I think I could do that. So for Spike, it was She's Gotta Have It. But like that same year at Sundance, there was this other movie called The Brothers McMullen. I was like, yo, it's like they didn't have a lot of resources. They didn't have a lot of, clout. They didn't know anyone, but they were able to put something together that people liked. And that was admirable to me. I was like, okay, that's something. And it made it feel real in a really cool way. There's a great movie called Medicine for Melancholy. This is Barry Jenkins' first film. That's also in that category too. It's about like these two like Black, 20-somethings in San Francisco, like a day in their life. He's like trying to get the girl and she's kind of playing him off a little bit. And they end up like, kind of going around the city, going to coffee shops, going to museums. I was like, Dad, look at these Black people like hanging out and like doing hipster stuff. You know what I mean? Yep. So it's like I've seen people do it, but I hadn't seen Black people do it. So I was like, oh, snap. Like I could ride a bike around town. Like I could like wear the weird hat. Like I could, do all these things. And like they wasn't sellouts. They wasn't, whack or whatever, but they were different. It was a different representation. So that's another one. I don't know if that's 5, but those are the ones that come to my mind right at the top.
Yeah. Them some good ones. Give me 2 of your favorite directors and why.
Right now, I would say David Fincher is one of my favorites. David Fincher did movies like kind of Gone Girl. He did Fight Club, stuff like that. He's like one of those things. It's like, I don't know if I would ever want to meet him because he seems like a really kind of tough guy. But he's like very precise. Very thoughtful. You can tell every single thing is like selected. You know what I mean? Nothing is happening by chance, which I really appreciate about him. And I'll throw Barry Jenkins in there as well. He's a younger director. He's only made 3 or 4 films, but I really like in terms of career arc, I really admire him. Like starting off, I'll put Ryan Coogler in there as well too. Like starting off with like these kind of small, intimate, character-driven films, and then being able to kind of build off of those to like, something like Black Panther, which the world is going to see. Like that movie made $1 billion, you know what I mean? But it still has heart. It still has soul. It still has the kind of DNA of the filmmaker, the point of view of the filmmaker, but it's also something that people from all over the world can sit down and enjoy if they're not from Oakland. You know what I mean? Which I feel like is the goal for me, is like to, bring like who I am and where I'm from into projects that like the world can enjoy.
Give me 3 actors you like to work with.
That I like to work with. I got to work with James Spader. Who you say your wife likes. He's great. I mean, he's a legend. That was my first ever episode of television. So it's like, I grew up watching him on like The Practice, movies, television. So it had the potential to be very intimidating. But he's a, very serious person, very particular actor. And my kind of efforts to be, good enough for him as a director kind of set me up in terms of how I prepare for work going forward. It's like you feel like you go play one-on-one against Michael Jordan. And it's like you prepare a certain way to play against Michael Jordan, and then you're good for the rest of your career because it's like that's how you prepare. So it's like no matter who you go up against, you're at least going to come in with a certain level.
That's
That was great. I work with a lot of young actors who you guys wouldn't know yet. But I enjoy that too, because I feel like it's really about developing them. But on the other side, I just work with Marcia Gay Harden, who is incredible. I did this show called So Help Me Todd, another like legendary like people. Really, really fun. Ellen Pompeo on Grey's Anatomy was really kind of a great experience, just because it's like, you have these iconic folks who are up on posters, who have been on your television for 20 years, and then you just get to work with them and you realize, oh, these are people, like these are human beings, these are regular folks who just happen to kind of be in this space. So that helped me like just say, okay, well, if I can be in the room with this person who feels larger than life, then I definitely can walk into other rooms and feel comfortable and feel like I belong there. So that was really important for me, starting off on big shows at the beginning of my career. For me, Debbie Allen was not only an actor on Grey's Anatomy, but she was the boss in terms of hiring directors. She hired me for my first directing job. And I was like, well, if I can stand in a room with Debbie Allen, then there's nobody on this earth that I feel like is going to intimidate me. You know what I mean? So I guess I would put her at the very top of the list.
What genre of movie would you like to direct?
I think science fiction at this point. I was not like a Star Wars kid. Like I didn't see Star Wars. I saw the first Star Wars like maybe 10 years ago. So it's like I wasn't growing up like watching these movies. I didn't read comic books. I didn't know none of that stuff. But now it's like it really started during the pandemic. I had all this time, so I started watching the old stuff and watching sci-fi television shows. And I feel like those shows can be like sneaky in like how they talk about like humankind and what it means to be a human and what it means to live in a society. But it's like shrouded in like these kind of space battles. You know what I mean? And like, all of these, it's like, it's about bigger. It's about the big themes, but you can do it in a theatrical way where it's like everybody wants to come and see all of these kind of amazing visuals, but really you're telling a story about like people, if you do it right. So I feel like, and that's an opportunity I feel like that's a genre that offers the opportunity for success. Horror movies are really cool too. I didn't really grow up like hardcore horror, but I feel the same way about those, where you can really be talking about the human experience, with the window dressing of like chopping people's heads off.
Man. Let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. One question on how was it meeting Shonda Rhimes?
It was interesting. I'll tell you my first meeting with Shonda Rhimes. So I was a production assistant. So that's like the lowest possible rung on the ladder. My job was to like get coffee and to do the grocery shopping and like restock all the pens and pencils and whatever it was. And so Shonda didn't come to the office every day because she had like multiple shows, very busy. But every once in a while she would come in and everybody would have to present what the episode was going to be. So like all their ideas, all the stories and things like that. And so I'm in the office, like she's in the writer's room. I didn't see her. It's like come in with the black car. She goes directly to the thing, it's a whole thing. And so one of her assistants comes to my desk with she was like, Shonda wants coffee. And I was like, what? And they were like, she wants coffee. Why aren't you already in there? So I was like, go. So I go in there. She's kind of holding court and I'm just kind of standing to the side or whatever, just kind of waiting for a moment for things to calm down or someone to help me and like introduce me. And she looks over directly at me and she was like, who are you? And I was like, I'm Dan. And she was like, and then my boss comes in, oh, Dan's, he's the new PA. He's going to get your thing or whatever. And so she kind of took a second to take me in for it. And she was like, okay. And then she just gives me the coffee order and then sends me on my way. And that was it. And it was like, I saw her many times after that, but what was great for me was just like seeing this like Black woman who commanded so much attention and respect, where it's like like when she was coming, everybody stopped what they did. They adjusted. They made sure everything was right. And it was like that was a powerful thing, especially coming into Hollywood, which is not like a very black space. I was really lucky. I started off interning at Will Smith's company. My first television job was on Grey's Anatomy, Shonda Rhimes' company. So my first like writing gigs were at Lena Waithe's company. So I've been very kind of fortunate to be in these spaces with black leadership, where people move different than they move in like companies that don't have black leadership, I'll say. So it was like, and being able to see like, oh, she really has the good. She's really this good. Like I can like be able to witness that in person was really special.
Like how many shows did she have on TV at the same time? Like, wasn't it 3?
Yeah, I think it was, at that time it was Grey's, it was Scandal, and I think maybe there was another one. But it was like at the time.
I thought it was How to Get Away with Murder.
Yes. How to Get Away with Murder. And so it's like you got these 3 shows, like these kind of 3 icons at the front of these shows, especially Kerry Wilson and Viola Davis in particular. So it was a good time to be there. And I learned a lot. That's where I learned to make television. I wish I would have done that instead of film school, which was very expensive. But like that's where I got to really learn what it meant to be a writer, to be a director, all those things.
Wow.
That's good business there. I'm going to hit you with these quick hitters real quick. You just got to pick one or the other.
All right, I'll be quick.
Goodfellas or Casino? Goodfellas or Casino?
I got to go Goodfellas, but it's close.
Clockers or Crooklyn?
That's tough. I'll say Crooklyn because that family aspect, you can't beat that. You can't beat that.
Terminator or Predator?
Terminator for sure. Terminator 2 is the better movie, but yes, Terminator for sure. Mm-hmm.
This one might be really tough for you. Rambo or Rocky?
I got to go Rocky. That's not as tough. I feel like Rocky, iconic. And all the Rocky films to follow, I feel better than the Rambo films to follow.
Got you. Well, I know this one got to be tough.
Yeah.
Two Denzel flicks. Training Day or He Got Game?
It's got to be He Got Game. It's definitely He Got Game. I actually got to see Denzel direct an episode of Grey's Anatomy, which was weird. It was like, why is he doing this? But it was actually cool too. Yeah. So it was really cool just to kind of be in his space. But He Got Game is an absolute classic. And it came out at the right time. I was the right age for that movie too.
And my brother's in that movie. Mr.
For real?
Arthur Agee. Yeah, Mr. Arthur Agee is in that movie.
In the beginning, when it comes on, I have a little cameo spot at Cabrini Green Courts. Yeah.
When the camera kind of push it, I remember that. I remember that.
And they showing all these different people, showing all these different individuals shooting basketball, and I was one of the joints in that.
You know what? What was crazy? This is a little off, but not so much. I was rewatching the movie, your movie, and I was like, wait, is that Jalen Rose in the background? And I was like, oh, I saw Chris Webber too. I was like, oh, snap. I wasn't like tapped into that when I saw it years ago. So I was like, that's a cool little Easter egg.
Yeah, that was you had to be top dog to go to that camp. I wasn't that good. You know, that was William, Tom Clancy, Howard Nathan, Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, all the 5'5".
Crazy.
Here's one for you, man. So you've been kidnapped.
Yes.
Who do you want to come rescue you? Jason Bourne, The Equalizer, Denzel Washington version, or The Blacklist, James Spader? Who's coming to get you?
I gotta go with Denzel because he's so smooth with it too, and I love that he became an action star like when he was 60. Like that was amazing. So he got the experience.
Action star when he was like 60.
Yeah, he got the experience. He got the suaveness in case he got to kind of work his way in. I go with Denzel.
Man, we appreciate you doing this halftime with us. We want to jump into your career, man. So after film school. You know, what was you told us your first industry job was with Shonda Rhimes and her company. How did you actually get that job?
Well, that was a journey too. It's like, my first thing was that internship at Overbrook. It was at the time Will Smith's company. I got that. A friend of mine had already interned there, so he kind of sent my resume over, and that got me an interview. And the beginning was a lot of intern work, like just kind of free work basically, and just kind of hustling to keep the lights on. One of the jobs, I don't know if you know, State Street Pictures, that's George Tillman Jr.'s company, him and Bob Title. Like, I just kind of like cold called them and said, hey, like, I know you guys, I'm from Chicago. I'm in LA. I'd love to kind of come into the office a couple days a week just as an intern. And he did that. And so I was working at their company, just like, answering the phone and kind of setting up meetings or whatever. And Bob would throw me some lunch money every day, which I needed. And eventually, like, he was one of the people who helped me get my first job. And that was at Walt Disney Motion Pictures. And so I was an assistant there. I was an assistant at another production company. But then I really wanted to kind of focus on starting my writing, directing career. So that's what led me to Grey's Anatomy. And as I've told before, it's like, that writer that I had heard on the podcast and like maintained this relationship with, years later, kind of reached out and said, hey, I know of this opportunity, are you interested? So for me, what I learned was like building relationships, people talk about networking, that term always feels gross to me. Because, it feels like you're trying to make these connections for the purpose of advancing yourself. But for me, it was really about just kind of like being nice and telling people what you're interested in and keeping up with folks. And that was like super helpful for me. So it was a lot of like being a, unpaid intern. Then that turned into being an assistant. And then eventually it's like that turned into like trying to create projects outside of work on my own that could be like my sample. That could be my kind of calling card to kind of get that first kind of professional writing and directing job.
Man, so you had to come from the ground up, huh?
Oh yeah. And what was my breakthrough was so, me and some friends from DePaul, we made this kind of independent pilot, and it was called Public Housing Unit. And it was set in I think it was 89 in the Chicago project. So Cabrini was gone by then. So we had to kind of fake that. So we were going to whatever parts of the projects, the old projects, a lot of them on the north side that were still there, anything with some height that could tell that story. And so we made this kind of independent pilot that became the thing that I could show people. So I showed that to Debbie Allen, and that created an opportunity. I submitted that to fellowships, with NBC and ABC and Sony. The one I got into the Sony fellowship that created the opportunity at the Blacklist. It was really about just kind of the hustle and just kind of making enough money to stay in LA and keep a little studio apartment and maybe go on a date every once in a while, and just trying to kind of advance the career slowly but surely. So I was in LA probably 6 years before I kind of broke through as a director. All of those 6 years were really just kind of hustling.
Any obstacles try to deter you from staying on that path?
A ton. Yeah, a ton.
You say a ton.
Mostly it was just
a ton.
Mostly it was just being poor. So it was like, I don't have any money. All my other friends have money. I can't go to my friends' weddings. I can't go home. So a lot of it was that. But it's like I had a good community. So when I came out here, it's like everybody was struggling to try to make it in Hollywood. So I had friends who were in the same position. So it didn't feel like it was impossible because I saw other people doing it. And slowly you saw people get traction. It's like, first it was just about getting an internship. It was like, can I get an internship? Then it was about getting a good assistant job. It was like, okay, you get the assistant job. Then it was about like getting towards whatever your actual passion was. So it was like the time it takes, people succeed at different speeds. For me, it was really about just trying not to compare myself to like the other people and trying to be supportive of my friends and building community and working on my stuff. So yeah, it was that. It was just the time that it took to get some traction. But once I was out here, it's like also I have no other skills, right? So it wasn't like I could, I had something to fall back on. It was like, if this doesn't work out, then I'm gonna be in trouble, So it was that thing too.
So studio apartments out there, they cheap, huh?
Yes. I got lucky. So I was actually, so like I live in like basically Silver Lake, Los Feliz now. This is the same place I had that first apartment. And well, actually my first situation was way worse. Like I stayed in like a small house with like 3 girls and I was the only guy in there. And that was a trip. But I eventually got to the point where I could at least afford like this like really ratty apartment. And it was like the size of the room I'm in right now, basically. But it's like you had to it was like rent control, basically. So you had to be friends with someone to get a place because it's like $650 a month and you live in like the equivalent of, think of like Lakeview in Chicago. Like it's that kind of neighborhood. It's like Lakeview, Lincoln Park, something like that. So I got to know some people who got me into the building. So I'm living in a really good neighborhood, but just a really crappy apartment. So for me, it was just about being in the space, being where the artists were, being all that other stuff. And I wasn't so worried about what the apartment looked like.
Right. You say he stayed with 3 women, Will. He did the Jack Tripper story, the Three's Company joint.
I know. I was wondering why he didn't write about that.
What an extra girl in there. First it was just 2, and now you got 3 in there.
Crazy story. One of my roommates was walking through Beverly Hills, Common, Chicago native, stops his car to talk to her. She became his assistant and worked for him for years, eventually running his company. So it was always these little Chicago connections. Like I never kind of completely got away from Chicago. I feel like I was either meeting people or crossing with people or little kind of like stories like that were coming my way. So it was always cool.
That's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah.
So the film festival circuit.
Yep.
How does that fit into the industry and like what role do the festivals actually play? And are they still as important today as they were back then? Back in the day?
I mean, they are. It's like, I saw you guys went to Sundance. It's like, I feel like back then it was really Sundance, right? Like now there are more festivals, but they're less quality festivals, right? So it's like, there's probably a list of the top 15 or 20 festivals that can really, I feel like, do something for you. And then there are just a ton that you could get in. And I don't know how much they do for you. For me, I was really fortunate. I made this short film. This is after I did Public Housing Unit. And it got into like the American Black Film Festival that they have down in Miami. And so HBO was sponsoring this festival. So because we got in, we got distribution on HBO. So our short film was able to like be like, if you went to HBO Max or whatever it was, you could find it. And so being able to say that was super helpful for me. For Public Housing Unit, that was a TV show that got into several of like the premier television festivals. There was a time where you didn't really, like film festivals were over here and television festivals were over here. Now they're kind of together. But I got into some bigger television festivals at the time. That opened some doors. Just giving you exposure, like having people see you as a director or a writer or whatever it is, all that makes a big difference. If you win awards, that makes a big difference. But all that stuff is tough. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a crapshoot pretty much. So for me, I tell people it's like, think about that as one part of your strategy, but don't put everything on it because everybody's not going to get into Sundance. I've been rejected from Sundance many times. So it's like, that's not always going to happen for you, but you got to try everything. And that was my strategy. It's like, try this, try that, see what works.
Well, my man is a film industry buff himself. Mr. Agee is always at some type of film festival. I mean, every time I look up, he's at a film industry.
Hey,
man, you got to.
So
you got
funny.
to.
Yeah, hey, it's so funny. That's how crazy Hoop Dreams was, because this was a documentary film that got accepted into Sundance. It got accepted into the, Robert Redford, that whole thing. And to get to, like you said, to get in that, like you got to, somebody had to seen some, you had to have a buzz about you or something.
Yes.
And then for all the, for Hoop Dreams to be in the Best Picture category, that just killed it. That just shot it to mainstream after that. I mean, we in a category with Forrest Gump and Goodfellas that year.
That's crazy. I did not realize that.
For Best Picture.
That's crazy.
Even though we didn't get the invite to the Academy.
Yeah, we didn't get the invite.
I don't know how Agee and I didn't get that personal invite.
Yeah.
Now, the producers and the directors went, but we didn't get the invite. I digress from that.
Right.
Yeah,
you know which one we did get invited to was the NAACP Image Awards.
Well,
and I'll take
we always go take care of us.
And I take that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick, Dan. What is a directing fellow? What is that?
Okay. So basically, it's kind of a exposure program. So this is what it is. Not enough women are being hired. Not enough Black people are being hired. Not enough people from whatever community you're from are being hired. So, the network studios come up with these programs to try to introduce more people into the pipeline, right? So they call them pipeline programs. So a lot of, for me, I had made things already, but they're trying to find new people that they can bring in. So they create like these contests. Basically, you submit your work, and then once you're accepted, you start this fellowship. And the fellowship is basically like some professional development. So they're bringing in studio executives to kind of talk to you, tell you about the business, how to break through all these things. They're bringing in other directors to kind of give you professional advice. You're taking meetings, you're showing people your work, with the idea being at the end of it, like, you'll be in a better position to get hired. At that point. So, it's like any other fellowship. They do these with like, doctors and lawyers and stuff like that. It's really an opportunity for these companies to put eyes on you and to be introduced to you so that if it's a good fit, you can turn that into a job. So I did a couple of those. I did the one with Sony. That went really well. It created an opportunity for me to shadow a director on the blacklist. And that's exactly how it sounds. You basically just are there to watch. And then if, things line up in a good way, they'll offer you an opportunity. It doesn't always work that way, but for me, it did. So that kind of led to that. Same thing at Grey's Anatomy. Like, that wasn't a fellowship. I worked there, but I showed them my work. They said, hey, we see some promise in this. Why don't you come and shadow a director? Debbie was a trip. She was like testing me at every turn and saying, hey, how would you do this? Okay, they did it this way. What would you do? And all that other stuff. And I was prepared, and that turned into an opportunity there. So there are a few of these programs across the business. And I think about just like festivals, like that's one thing that you pursue, but that's not the only thing that you pursue. But I got pretty lucky with those. Which
episode was that of Grey's Anatomy you did?
That was I've done two, which was great. I can't even remember what season it was. Probably season 14 or 15 or something like that. But it was, I don't know, it was fun. That one was special because I was an assistant on that show for 3 years. Everyone knew me. I was the kid who was just always just kind of hanging out by the monitor and trying to ask people questions and stuff like that. So like the crew was very supportive. Like, they were like, they wanted me to do a good job. They wanted to kind of see the story kind of complete itself. So that was really special.
And speaking of that, can you walk us through what is that like for you? Like the filmmaking process? Take us through like your routine. You get the gig, and what is that like? Take us through that routine.
So I'll tell you. Okay, so I got a show airing tonight called "So Help Me Todd" on CBS. So I'll use that as an example.
Okay.
So it's that's a brand new show. So there isn't a lot of tape on it. It's not like okay, I won't use that analogy, but it's like there's not a lot of material out there to prepare. For a show like The Blacklist, I was going into my first ever episode. So I was like, I got to do a good job. I watched 100 episodes, no exaggeration. I watched 100 episodes, every episode of The Blacklist to kind of prepare. Now I don't have so much time to do that. But the point is, you want to watch as much as you can, or at least that's what I do, just to get the feel for it. It's like, okay, they do this kind of comedy. They tell these kind of jokes. The camera moves, generally in this way, whatever. So it's just me kind of getting a sense of what they do. And then once you land, it's about reading all the scripts and just developing a plan for your episode. So you have a script for your episode. It's like, okay, this is what's happening this week. This is the hijinks. This is the case. This is the investigation. These are the locations. So you're really thinking about a plan, like what is my version of this script? That starts with like looking for locations. So you're picking locations like, okay, we can have it in one of these 4 places. I say, okay, this is the best place according to how I envision the show. So it's about building sets. It's about like communicating with your department heads. It's like, okay, I think the scene is going to be like this. I think I want to shoot it like this. Like, let's talk about how we want to build those sets, It's about, kind of thinking about performance and character. Like, where are the characters now? Where were they before? Where's this episode taking them? So kind of mapping that out in terms of like, how are you going to direct the performances? So that's a week of prep. After that, it's about shooting. So now got my plan. It's time to shoot the episode. So we just take it day by day, usually 8 or 9 days, and shoot a certain amount of scenes in a day. And it's like, okay, all that work you did during prep, it's about just kind of executing it at that point and changing it and like realizing, okay, the directors or the actors have their own ideas. So how can I mesh my ideas with their ideas? How can I convince them that my idea is good? Or how do you say, hey, that idea is better? Let's do that thing. Working with the other, crew members, your cameraman and all these folks to kind of execute your plan the best that you can. And then after you do that part, it's about editing the episode. So now you're working one-on-one with the editor to really kind of like put the kind of final stamp on it. It's like, okay, this is what I plan to do. This is what I actually did. And how do we make this the best version of this story? And then in television, you walk away after that. So, in a movie, you kind of stay to the very end of the process. It's like if you're working on like a feature film, like you're there till like the final version is done. In television, because of the scheduling, it's like I'm often either on to another show or doing something different after I turn in my cut. So it's always a little surprise when I watch the episode tonight. I'll see exactly how much of what I did stayed in exactly how I did it, but generally it's probably 90%, something like that.
So I just got to ask you this, man. When you get there, like, are you like in charge?
You have to take charge, but you have to do it in a particular way, right? Because this show, the last show I did is a first season show. That's different than a show like Grey's Anatomy that's in season 15. But it's I think about it in terms of like captaining a ship. You know what I mean? And the crew's already been there. It's like there's an expectation that you're going to come and lead the ship, but you can't come in and try to dominate everybody because you're not going to, someone was there before you. You need them to do a good job and someone's going to be there after you. You know what I mean? So it's like, in certain respects, it's like you have to kind of take up space. You have to kind of like communicate your vision. You have to kind of take control, but you don't want to try to lord over everyone. And then in television, it's like you have your director, but then you have your showrunner. So like Shonda is an example of the showrunner. It's like, it's her show. It's her show. Now it's my job to execute the storytelling of this episode. But at the end of the day, it's her show. So like I haven't had any issues or kind of power struggles or any kind of, because I understand how TV works. I've been, I was blessed to kind of come up as a writer as well. So I get the politics of it. But also it's like there's an expectation that you're going to be the leader in terms of production. So you really do have to step into that.
Right. Daniel, let me ask you this. Have you ever had a problem securing a permit for a location shoot?
I haven't. Back before, nowadays that's someone's job. When I was in Chicago making movies at DePaul, we didn't have any permits. So we just did it. And then if someone came along, we were like, we can't.
Hey, man, get your ass out of the shot.
We could do it. Yeah. I was like, I thought we could do it, man. So it was a lot of just kind of playing dumb. And when I was in Chicago making movies, this was before Chicago Fire and The Chi and all of those shows. Empire wasn't even out yet. So like it was different where it was a novelty. You could go into a store and say, hey, I'm doing this school project. I'd love to use your store. They didn't charge you. Sometimes they'll bring food for you. You know what I mean? They were excited to be on TV. They're not going to be on TV. No one's going to see your short film. But it's like, it was different. Nowadays, everybody's savvy and they know it's a business. So you can't move like that. But we didn't have too much trouble. We was running around Chicago with cameras downtown, Southside, everywhere. It was fun.
Like when you get on the set, like who do you talk to first? Who's your right-hand person?
My right hand, there's like three of us basically. So my right hand is the assistant director. So that position, it's a kind of a crazy title. He's not my assistant. That's a career position. But his job is to basically move the crew. All right. So if I say, okay, this is the shot we're doing, then he makes sure everybody is where they need to be and doing what they need to do. And me and him have been working, and him or her have been working all throughout prep. So I've communicated our plan. I was like, okay, they make the schedule. I was like, okay, this is how I want to do it all of these days. So they know ahead of time, but their job is to actually kind of keep things moving. And then also it's the DP, the director of photography. That's the main cameraman. And so I'm talking to him constantly, him or her, to kind of talk about how we're actually going to execute all of the shots that we need to get the scene. So the three of us are kind of a team, like one in terms of logistics and one in terms of creative. And my job is to kind of come in with a plan and communicate that so everybody can get the job done.
Hey, I just got to ask this, man. And I know we're taking up so much of your time, man. I promise you.
No, man, I'm having a blast.
But I just got to ask you, have you ever got to the set and you just have one of them difficult actors?
Oh, yeah.
How did you handle that?
I feel like you have to remember what the goal is, I feel like in sports, I go to sports for so many like analogies because that's kind of how I learn to think about it. I kind of think about the director as the coach of the team, and then the actor as like the star player of the team. So it's like I need you to be successful, right? So maybe I have to ignore some things. Maybe I have to push you on some things. Maybe it is a give and take. Maybe you have to just kind of look past some things, whatever. So when I've had actors who are difficult, I focus on what the job is. Like the job is to like get the scene, to make the episode, to tell the story. Maybe I gotta, maybe I gotta handle you carefully to get that job done. Maybe I have to.
Agee, I'm gonna stop there right now because you see he giving us this political answer. He know that ain't what we want. We want to know who was difficult and what did you do? We want names. We want to know, did you have to, as they said in them, take some names and kick some butts?
I haven't had to, nothing's gotten like unprofessional or anything like that, but things have gotten direct. It's like, hey, I need you to do this, or tell me exactly what the problem. One time I had to clear the set and say, okay, everybody walk away. Let's, you and me, talk about how we can come to an understanding about how we need to go forward. So you have to be strong, and especially when you're working with stars, because they'll run over you if you let them. And some of them want to test whether they can run over you or not. Which I feel like is fair. You've been in the game 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, whatever it is, or this is just your show. You're the number one actor on the call sheet. Like, I expect that you are going to try to test me to see if I'm prepared enough or to see if I know what I'm doing. It's like any other coach. It's like you got some kind of visiting coach. If you're a star player on that team, you want to know, it's like, before I listen to you, do you know what you're talking about? I think that's fair, right? But when you're talking about people who are just being difficult for the purpose of being difficult, sometimes you got to call them out. It's like, okay, you got a problem. What exactly is your problem? Explain it to me. And sometimes they can't explain because they're just mad at their wife, or, you know, they were late this morning, or they don't like their makeup, or they're mad they're not getting paid enough, whatever it is. All of these things can happen. But, you know, every actor is different. So you have to kind of, you know, figure out how they work and how you can put them in a position to be successful.
We still can't get no names and no stories, huh?
I'm hoping to have a long career. I want to have a long career. Y'all got listeners all over the world. No, I can't do it.
Will trying to turn us into TMZ, and I'm like this. I'm trying to tell them, I'm trying to piggyback on that about the divas. I'm gonna take y'all back. Remember the Sprite Obey Your Thirst commercial, and you had the three basketball players, and they said, cut. He was like, what? I played Hamlet at Cambridge. He's like, what is my motivation?
And that happens a lot. I mean, that's the heightened version of it. But as a director, a big part of your job is to like create a space where the actors can do their work. So maybe it is about reminding them about where their character was 3 episodes. And that's my job to know. That's why I try to do all that preparation. So if someone asked me what their motivation is, I was like, well, 2 episodes ago, you got fired by this guy, or this guy, you know, betrayed you, or, you know, you guys want the same job. And it's about kind of like giving them everything they need to give you what you need to tell the story. So that kind of stuff happens a lot. That's par for the course. Not too much drama, though. I've been lucky.
That's a blessing, Edo, man. I appreciate your detail to that, because you see all of the intrinsic things that goes into creating a show. You know, as fans, we just see a product. We don't see all you're behind. You know, you got to deal with this person and that person and shoot. And then this week you actually might have a guest star on there who's probably bigger than, you know, the star of the show.
That's often the case. And then that's interesting because now everybody's moving around a little bit different, especially if it's like a movie star and they're coming in, and, you know, movie stars move different. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's a big part. Ego is a part of things as well. But generally, my experience has been like really solid with like professionals who are there to work, who want to get home to their kids, just like everybody else wants to get home to their kids. So it's like they're here to do the job, and the expectation is you're going to come in and help them get through the work, and everybody's going to go home.
We want to thank you for being on the show. I got one final question, then my man Agee going to hit you with his final question. And my question for you is, man, what words of wisdom do you have for the next generation, or tips or advice? Now, knowing that you are a part of that next generation, but the ones even younger than you that haven't had that first job opportunity or that show or that movie yet, what's your inspiration that you can share with them?
I feel like for me, someone, when I first got to LA, what they told me, the most important thing is really about tenacity, right? Just hanging in there. They basically said the advice was don't go home. Like, if you stick around, you'll be fine. It's like, even if what you originally planned to do isn't what you end up doing, you know, just kind of staying the course and not giving up will take you to a career. And I really believe that. I didn't plan to direct television. I wanted to make, like, you know, kind of small, romantic comedies in New York. It's like, this isn't what I envisioned for my career. And as we've talked about it, like, if you go back far enough, I thought I would be on SportsCenter by now, So it was like, things change. But it's like, if whatever you decide to do, just kind of give your full effort and don't give up. But, also be okay with pivoting, So if something is like just moving forward, maybe not in that straight line, maybe it's going to go to the left or to the right or something like that, but just continuing to push ahead, I feel like is one of the, is a life skill that can help you no matter what your path is, be it education or, if you want to be a police officer, if you want to be a fireman, whatever you want to do, you're going to come up against obstacles. Things aren't going to go exactly your way. But it's just about kind of staying the course.
Agee, hit him with that last question.
What is the next chapter in Daniel's hoop dream?
Wow. For me, I feel like it's really about just building on what I've done so far. It's like in television, I've worked in, a lot of broadcast television. I kind of want to move into, a little bit more cable, a little bit more streaming, shows that like I get really excited about. It's like, if House of the Dragon is on, then I'm like there at 6 p.m., like lights off, like popcorn ready to go. It's like, I want to be, working on the kind of shows that I get the most excited about watching. Right. So for me, it's just about kind of growing in television, like getting like, more interesting work for me and working more and working with, I'm now at a place where it's like all of my friends kind of, we've started to rise together. So I have friends who are writers on shows. I have friends who've sold shows. It's like having the opportunity to connect with them and work together, I think is like the height of it. You know what I mean? If you can kind of have that group like we've seen before, the Brat Pack and all those, it's like people who are able to kind of rise together and kind of see that happen. That's great. I'm getting married pretty soon in July.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's like, like thinking about family and thinking about like the next part of my life outside of career is kind of big too. But just, man, just thinking about just kind of growing and enjoying life and, just trying to be positive and getting the most out of it, like hanging out with y'all. This is dope. You really don't know what this means to me. So this is really special as well. But just kind of collecting opportunities,
I'm the gold of my era. I've been a trending topic. I'm as fly as a feather. My pockets macroscopic. See, with time I get better. I'm always in the action, kid. Know I got it locked from Chicago where the toughest live. Concrete jungle, earn my stripes on the pavement there. You make it here, then you can make it anywhere. No comparison. Your game is embarrassing. No one can touch me. I'm all for going there again. Yeah, I think I'm ballin' like I'm Will Gates. I'm hoop dreaming, trying to fight against a sealed fate. More faith, think I'm ballin' like I'm Agee. I'm box office and one day they gon' have to pay me. Yeah, I think I'm ballin' like I'm Will Gates. I'm hoop dreaming, trying to fight against a sealed fate. More faith, think I'm ballin' like I'm Agee. I'm box office and one day they gon' have to pay me.
Hoop Dreams, the podcast, an Unlearning Network production. Written and produced by Arthur Agee, Will Gates, Matt Hoffar, with audio engineering from Matt Savage. For more episodes, check us out at www.unlearningnetwork.com.
Gotta be a dog to survive in this cold weather. Ice in my veins, no need for a warm sweater. I'm coming forward, all best believe I won't let up, yeah. Hey, I think I'm ballin' like I'm Will Gates. I'm hoop dreaming, trying to fight against a sealed fate. More faith, think I'm ballin' like I'm Agee. I'm box office and one day they gon' have to pay me. Yeah, I think I'm ballin' like I'm Will Gates. I'm hoop dreaming, trying to fight against a sealed fate. More faith, think I'm ballin' like I'm Agee. I'm box office and one day they gon' have to pay me.